So, welcome everybody, ladies and gentlemen, to today's event on the democratic reporting in times of elections, which is an issue which I really look forward to discussing, and I am so happy that this conference, this discussion is organized, and so thankful that you are all here. Welcome to all of you, and I have to say, I just come more or less back from a week in Ukraine, visiting our office in Kiev, but also in other cities in Ukraine, and it has been quite moving for me to be there. And one of the issues which I take away from this week is that sometimes we don't see anymore what is happening. And times of war, for example, so this situation in Ukraine is such a moment where it's complicated to really get the information about what's going on. But being there then shows a completely different reality. And we had a lot of alarms, for example, last week, as the attacks in Ukraine have been more massive throughout the last days. And that's also for a reason, because pressure is again high from the side of the Russian aggressor. And that shows how important it is to be also where those changes happen, where those events happen, and to also bring back the realities from there. And that is something which, of course, obviously is an important role for independent media. I was happy to meet the chief editor of the Kyiv Independent in Kiev, and can only tell that for them the work is really hard, even in particular at the front lines to report. It shows how important it is to strengthen those who are trying to shed some light on the events happening not only in Ukraine but all over the world. But we don't have to just look so far away to see that there is concerning developments all around us. When we look here in Germany, at the beginning of the year, you might all have seen the reporting which has been done by the investigative journalism platform Korrektiv under the so-called Geheimplan gegen Deutschland narrative, which was an activity to, in the end, install anti-democratic and anti-constitutional policies in Germany, and people were aware of this only by reporting happening. And in reaction to that, all over Germany, many people were mobilized for manifestations to show also some signs against these developments. 3.5 million people in Germany were on the streets to show that they are not in line with what is happening behind secret doors in this situation. And looking at that now after the European elections, we can say, of course, this had an effect on the result, as right-wing extremists, as we have seen here, organizing themselves, are not getting the results which in the meantime they already had been predicted in surveys, but below that. But nonetheless, we can see that still they get a wide share of votes, not only here in Germany or in Eastern Germany, in rural areas, but all over Europe, also in France, if you look at the maps. So there is a problem, an underlying problem, which is evolving. And that is, of course, also linked to the fact or to the question how people get to information or misinformation in today's reality. And that is obviously driven also by social media platforms. And we are facing a situation where those social media platforms with their algorithm are pushing negative and more populist or more extreme voices more than those who are nuanced, who are more positive, constructive, or a little bit more silent. And that problem needs to be dealt with. And also we need to see that obviously there was for too long time too much silence from those who were defending democracy, who were defending constitutional principles and baseline principles of our societies on these networks. So we also need more political education, more media, more independent media coverage on these platforms. And that is why I'm very happy that we have this moment here to discuss how we can secure that, in particular when we are at the run-up to elections this year. Half of the globe is called to go for an election. That's a really central moment. We see that important elections are coming up, the US presidential elections, but also the German Bundestag elections and the French presidential elections. Those are at the core of activity also by those who disseminate propaganda and want to undermine democratic movements and democratic states even. And we shouldn't be naive about the fact that democracy is attacked, in particular in those countries. So it is very important to get active, and I'm very happy that you're all here discussing this today. Let me finish by saying democracy dies in darkness. That has been the Washington Post motto since 2017. And I've always thought this is only partially true. Democracy can also die in broad daylight. We can only save democratic institutions, including the fourth estate, responsible journalism, and educated citizens. Otherwise, democracies die also in broad daylight. So let me once again thank you all for being here, but thank you also our Washington, DC office for organizing this amazing event together with the nonprofit Neue, deutsche Medienmacher innen. And yeah, I'm handing over to Elena. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan Philipp. So very short hello from my part. When politics radicalizes, good journalism must counteract. Instead of being driven by populism, there is a greater need than ever for human rights-based approaches in editorial offices. As the Association Neue Deutsche Medienmacherinnen, we demand the perspectives of marginalized groups receive more attention. So we are very pleased that together with the Heinrich Böll Foundation, with Jan Philipp, with Ella and her team, we have been able to assemble this great panel with experts from Germany and the USA. Thank you for the cooperation, and so I hope you enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Oh, hello, good evening. You can sit wherever you want. Yeah, hello and a good evening and a big welcome here at the Heinrich-Böll. Oh, I'm sorry. That's professional. Hello and good evening. And a big welcome here at the Heinrich Böll Foundation in Berlin. Nice to see you that so many came here live and also in our live stream. Say hello. Yeah, say cheese. And as you hear, we will talk in English. So I see lots of them have a microphone or headphones on their ears. So perfectly. So we have a live translation, as you can see. My name is Alina Boot. I'm a journalist and also a news anchor, so we have a very nice journalistic round here, experts, as you can see. So I guess we will have a very exciting discussion today with the topic, how does political journalism live up to its democratic responsibility? That's our topic today. As we heard from Mr. Albrecht, 2024 is a global super election year, and there is a lot of stake for democracy in the United States and Europe, as we saw in the last 2 weeks, I guess, and in Germany next year, but also this year. The anti-liberal radicalization of right-wing parties is posing new challenges for political reporting in our democracies. And at the same time, the media themselves have become the target of anti-democratic parties and groups, as we also heard. So today we want to speak about this, not easy topic, and we have a lot of questions. The Heinrich Böll Foundation and the Neue, deutsche Medienmacher, innen, who puts this on together, invite you also after this discussion to a Q&A. So if you have questions, just remember them after the hour almost, or after the discussion, so you can ask them if you want. And so thank you all for joining here today and in the live stream. So we're gonna start the discussion today, and we're gonna start in the US. So I would say, I don't know if it's ironic, but it's always easier to complain about the others than about yourself. But first of all, I wanna introduce our very nice round here with Aaron Haynes, an award-winning journalist with nearly 2 decades of experience. Aaron was previously a national writer on race for the Associated Press. She also worked at the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, and is now editor-at-large for the 19th non-profit news outlet covering the intersection of women, politics and policy. Nice to have you here. Big applause. Then Shakuntala Banerjee, a nice colleague, we know us from ZDF Times, is the deputy head of ZDF's studio in Berlin right now, and designated head of ZDF's editorial team on politics and current affairs, starting in November. That's right. Banerjee is also a moderator and anchor of Berlin Direct, which is the most, or one of the most successful political magazine show in German TV. Welcome. Jay Rosen, nice to have you here, is one of the leading media scientists in the United States. He has been teaching journalism at New York University since 1986. That's correct, hopefully. And is researching structural change in journalism and the media. He's known, among other things, for his criticism of the concept of journalistic objectivity. Welcome. And Hadija Haruna Ölker, the also award-winning journalist and author, has been working for many years on the question of how balanced reporting can look like in multicultural societies. She's working for the Hessische Rundfunk, including the show Der Tag, and she also co-founded the association Neue, deutsche Medienmacher, innen, which campaigns for more diversity in German newsrooms. Welcome. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, we're gonna start in the US, and about the problems there. We will start there, the current political reporting by established media. Mrs. Haynes, if you turn on the TV in the US and catch a news channel, but by the way, actually also the German TV, but mostly in the US, there are reports about Trump all day long. Hour-long live streams from motorcades, airplanes. Donald Trump is currently getting a lot of attention again, often without critical assessment. Meanwhile, the broadcaster Fox News is portraying him as a victim. Himself, he's doing this too, actually. Are the media repeating their mistakes from 2016?
Yes, and 2020. Oh, right, sorry.
It's on, I guess, yeah.
Okay, definitely from 2016 and from 2020, a lot of political journalism is absolutely repeating the mistakes of the last 2 presidential cycles, and now we have former President Trump running again to become president again, and is the presumed nominee of the Republican Party, despite the fact that he has been found civilly liable of sexually assaulting someone. He has been found criminally convicted of trying to interfere with the 2016 election, and yet here we are, right? And here we are covering this election very much as kind of a status quo election. How is President Trump playing with the voters? Who's up or who's down, between former President Trump and President Biden? Even though we have the same 2 candidates running for president, this could not be a more different election. This is literally an election in America about whether or not we're going to get to have more elections. Like, democracy is on the line in in our politics right now. And so that is the question that is really before the American voters, but it's not always being discussed that way in our politics. And so that's absolutely something with less than 5 months to go now before November that feels very urgent. I mean, literally, we are having this conversation today on the 2-year anniversary of the end of federal protections for abortion in America. The Dobbs decision that came out of the Supreme Court, that was 2 years ago today. And so we're operating in an environment where many American women feel less free, less fair, less equal. And that was something that was brought about by the former president of the United States, the Supreme Court, that he ushered into our politics, and something that was the project of one party in our country for about a generation. And so where we are as a country, who we are as a country, is what elections are generally about. And being able to reflect that as honestly and as accurately as possible is literally why I left mainstream media to try to start a new newsroom, which is why we founded the 19th, to have a different conversation about what our politics in this country looks like.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to talk about your newsroom also a bit. I mean, but just to come back to the media or political reporting, I mean, airtime is airtime, and it's visibility and visibility for him. Jay Rosen, what is the real problem political reporting in the US? I mean, just to ask is, does political reporting always or have to change when someone like Trump comes up? Or populists, or, you know?
Is this working? Not the democracy, but the microphone.
Well, we will see.
Well, I have a slightly complicated view about this. On the one hand, journalists have done a lot to make up for the mistakes of 2016. And they're very aware, for example, that Trump is constantly lying about matters large and small, and they have addressed it that way. Which was itself a big fight to do that. They're not going to cover his rallies as frequently as they used to because very little happens there that's new or interesting. They also understand that Trump breaks almost all the rules of political decorum and democracy and the protections that we have for continuing to be a democracy. And they're aware of that. But in a deeper way, they haven't done the work that's necessary to cope with this moment in this sense. All the standard practices of the American press are based on a picture of American politics that stayed the same for many, many decades, and that is two roughly similar parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, that operate in the same way but have different agendas. And there's a kind of symmetry to the way that they're organized. And therefore, journalists as political practitioners can stand in the middle between the left and the right, between the Democrats and the Republicans, and without joining either side, they can tell us what each party is planning, what they're doing, who's likely to win, who has the advantage. And that's a whole kind of like science of reporting on national politics that depends on this image, this symmetrical image of two parties that are more or less same and struggle with each other for each election. And now we're in a situation where you have massive asymmetry between the two parties, where one is a normal political party in US terms, which doesn't mean that they're necessarily right about everything or good at what they're doing, but they're just a normal, recognizable party, the Democrats. And on the Republican side, you have the emergence of a movement, the MAGA movement, which is anti-democratic in many ways and is undermining the institutions of American democracy. So there isn't anything in the code, in the playbook, for how political journalists are supposed to respond to that situation. And most important criticism I have made of them is that they declined to try and bring any new practices in to correspond to the change in the political parties. So we have this asymmetry between the political parties, and we have practices in the press that kind of, sort of assume that it's still the same way it's always been.
Mrs. Banerjee, different starting point in Germany because there's not extreme polarization like in the US, like the two parties, but right-wing narratives and ways of speaking. Are there any connections with the US?
I think there are similarities because right-wing groups have a tendency to work in similar ways, or to bring their narratives to the people. So we are both struggling with the way to counter this, I think. And I agree with you when it comes to practices, because we are very used to look at certain rituals, at certain systems, at a certain kind of communication, which used to be common for politics, and we haven't adapted yet to other forms of communication. Social media are just one example. We are still trying to keep pace with what's going on there, and we are still trying to understand why some narratives are more successful there than others. But also the kind of discussion, or the kind of how extremist groups are shaping their discussions. They are very different from what we are used to, and what we are used to put into our usual reporting. So we have a lot to learn there. I think we already became better, but we are still doing a lot of homework.
So you said we are getting better. Mrs. Haruna Oeke, in our democratic responsibility in the media, or as media, we have to report neutrally in a balanced manner. Is this coming back to haunt us while reporting about the AfD, right-wing extremists, Trump, and so on?
So this is an interesting question when we're talking about playbooks, which you were talking about, because when we look on the reporting of the playbook in the German media, I would say we didn't see that there was a story written which we didn't cover. So there was you can say maybe there are different periods we had in covering the story of the AfD, which is a story which is a decade old. And I remember that they founded themselves in Wiesbaden, for example. So it's our broadcasting area where I work, and when they founded themselves,
not in East Germany, as maybe everyone thinks.
So not Frankfurt. Yeah, Frankfurt am Main, so West Germany, and it was not covered by the Hessische Rundfunk, for example. That's a very important story because they were not seen as important. So this was the first phase, a period where not seeing these people as a danger. It's our history, in the German history, and this is the complexity of the story, that right-wing people are always different people, and now they are elected, and now we need to fulfill the story which was not covered, and overcome the second period, which was there was a claim which was saying talking with the rights, mit Rechten reden. And this was an important period because, yes, we needed to talk, but the question was, how did we talk as journalists with the right people? Did we have the context? Did we have the knowledge? Did we have the instruments to make good interviews, for example? So now we are in the routine now that we have elected people, and we need to talk to them. And this is our challenge now. So for me, it's always the bigger picture. Look back, what was not doing it in a constructive way, say what can we do now better than we did before, but now we need to do it, and this is the difference.
Mr. Rosen, because you said that they're elected now, we have to talk to them, because it's a big discussion actually here in Germany. I don't know if it's the same in the US about AfD or how to deal with them, for example. In 2018, you were a fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy and studied German media in Berlin. So during this day you did a research of the self-image of German journalists. In an interview at that time you said that you noticed that journalists still have problems dealing with right-wing populists. They talk a lot with AfD politicians, but according to you, they have not yet found a confident way of dealing with them. I mean, it was 2018. Did you notice a difference from 2018 to today?
Well, I'm just back for one day.
Okay.
So it's...
Well, did you see something?
I'll try to indicate what I was saying at that time. My project was to try to say, what is German press think? Press think is the name of my blog, which I've been writing since 2003. And the term press think, which I made up, so I'm the authority on it because I created that word. The idea of press think is that journalism has certain ideas encoded in it, and the American way of journalism tells people who enter the profession how to think about journalism. And so I knew what the American press think was. I had been writing about it for 20 years, but during my 3-month fellowship at the Bosch Foundation, which is not that far from here, I had a project, and my project was to figure out what is German press think. And the most interesting thing I found by talking to like 45 different people that I interviewed, well, and it's more important now than it was then, is that German press think in many ways resembles American and UK's press think, but there's one really important difference to me, which is German journalists take it for granted that they have to help prevent extremism from coming back and overtaking German society. That's just a view of their responsibilities that almost everybody has, even if it's not written down or official. And of course, journalists aren't the only ones who have that responsibility in Germany, so do many others, but it's striking to me, and it was when I first kind of learned about it, that they would think it natural to oppose extremism that makes it possible for an authoritarian government to once again come to Germany. And what was so striking about that for me was, in America, we don't have any such idea. And now we need one.
You need one?
We need to know what do you do when an authoritarian starts to take over your political system and you're in
Trump
the press. Now you can say, well, we'll cover that. This is one of the great things about being a journalist is anytime you find something truly fucked up, you can say, well, we'll cover it, right? And if we'll make a news story out of it. But the more important problem that I'm trying to figure out is how can the press institutionally fight against the illiberal downtake of democracy and still fulfill its obligations as a profession that isn't on the team and doesn't join this side or doesn't join that side. And so that feature of German press think that I wrote about in 2018 is now like on my mind 24/7.
Okay. Mrs. Banerjee, would you agree to Jay Rosen? I just see your face.
With which part exactly? I'm still trying to figure out if we really have this conviction. I mean, for us, we are working for the 2 public state broadcasters. It's in our book of rules, of course. It's in our book of rules. We are obligated to obliged. Sorry, my English to counter anti-democratic movements and developments. But I don't think that each and every one of us wants to be a fighter against movements. And it's become incredibly difficult too, since we have one party in our parliament which has certain aspects of anti-liberalism and which has some very influential members that are clearly anti-democratic, and some can legally be called fascists by court ruling. And so it has become incredibly difficult to, on the one hand, report on their goals in a non-biased way, and on the other hand, to point out what may lie behind it. So that's, I'm not quite sure if we have come up with a good solution of this problem.
Because I wanted to ask you, because you already interviewed, for example, Tino Kropala, who's the lead spokesman for the AfD. As I said, there are still lots of discussions if we discuss with them, if we can interview them, yes or no. I mean, I don't know if it would be the same with Trump, for example, but Mrs. Haynes, would you interview Trump if you could do this, for example?
The answer to that is yes.
Maybe it's not the same, but
I would interview him, but interviewing him in real time is not a good idea. Interviewing him in a town hall type of format where he has an audience that he can perform to, not necessarily a good idea. Because, well, if you interview him in real time, you're spending most of the interview fact-checking, going back and saying, well, actually, you know, Mr. Trump, that this wasn't true, or that's not true, or this is not accurate, or that's not accurate. Oh, and we're still going to tell the big lie in front of potentially millions of viewers. That's not, that would not be the purpose, you know, for me. But there is value in talking to a former President Trump, because again, he's not just the former President of the United States. He is somebody who is actively campaigning to be president again, and who appears to be poised to be the Republican nominee for president. So this is somebody who stands a very good chance of becoming president again in the fall. And so the American people deserve to know who it is. I mean, for as much as we do know, right? He continues to say what he would do, not just what we can talk about what he has done, but we also are hearing about what he would do should he be elected to a second term. And so that is important for voters to know so that they can feel informed and empowered before they go to the ballot box. But I think, you know, a couple of things that people have already set up here, just to kind of circle back and put a pin in those. We do tend to cover people whose opinion may be out of the mainstream at the moment, you know, at that time. Oh, isn't this interesting? Or isn't it, you know, but this isn't, you know, we don't take it necessarily seriously until it is mainstream. Like, what is our obligation as journalists is to tell the most accurate and honest story about who and where we are as a country, right? So, you know, does that mean pointing out that, you know, we do have one party in our country right now that is very much not about the business of democracy as we know it, right? And asking people who are prepared to vote for that again, why are you prepared to vote for that again? Why is this okay with you? What does this mean about your relationship to your fellow citizens, right? People who maybe don't share your identity, or people who you maybe do not agree with. Like, it is, that is something that as journalists we can do. I mean, listening to Jay, I think we do kind of have a blueprint for, you know, as journalists, being able to say that we as a profession can be about the business of helping to move our democracy forward, to making sure that more people are brought into our democracy, that we are continuing to include people and not exclude people from our democracy, that is something that matters to us as a journalistic value, right? And so to not do that and say, oh, well, here's what's happening on this side, and here's what's happening on that side, and you just, you know, and it's up to you to kind of figure that out. Like, that's not serving the electorate. It's not, again, it's not us really telling the big T truth about what is happening to and in our democracy.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you, Lee.
No, not at all. But I'd like to add to that, because the notion of that excluding someone from the discussion will make the problem go away is completely misleading, especially in times like these, where we are not the high priests of opinion or of the public, but you have a public. So everyone nowadays can reach out to the public and get followers for their ideas and convince people. It's not only our domain anymore. So if we stop talking to someone, it doesn't mean their ideas will go away. So yeah,
Can
or
I
the
add-
audience.
Can I add something in the beginning when you were saying that we have in the ARD and ZDF we have our history? I mean, the funding of the ARD and ZDF is our history of a nationalistic background, but the problem is that there is a missing link in what I would say what is a human right-based journalism in Germany today. We don't have a definition. We don't even use this kind of wording in Germany, because this story is a past story. So now we open the shelf and we take out our rules from the ARD and ZDF as if it's new. And we are talking about opinion. We are talking about journalistic attitude. Now in a situation where the question is of defending democracy. And journalists are not, when I learned, like when I got the education of being a journalist, I was not taught to be defending something. I was taught to report. And neutral, you were saying in the beginning. And neutral means not to be on one or the other side. And that's the struggle now. Because to be on a democratic side, on a human rights side, on the Grundgesetz, like the basic ground law, basic law, this is now what we challenge. And this is a big question which we talk about in journalistic rounds. What is our responsibility now? And this was always the same, I would say, but it was out of the perspective of the audience. It was different because the audience was very heterogeneous before. And it is a heterogeneous audience, but it was homogeneous in many journalistic rounds. So now we have people, we have the AfD, but it's not only the AfD, it's the right-winged area, the milieu, everything. And we have an audience which is a multicultural society. But this multicultural society doesn't feel represented in the media, for example, in the covered stories. So we have a debate long time before the AfD came about what is our society about. And this is, for me, the link to the US. Because when we look what we are talking about the US, we have a special frame about the story in the US. And this is like, for example, before we were here, we were talking about race. And so that we don't have German words for our society, and we use terms from America to describe our society, which is a multicultural one, but different than the US. But we have similar debates like cancel culture, wokeness, everything. And this is like mixed with human rights talks, because what is wokeness? What are human rights? And all this is a mixture in our debates, and this is our responsibility. And I know I was talking now many things, but this is all together in the same time, which we have to deal with. And in that time, right-wing parties do their things on social media, for example.
Yeah. So it's also a global thing, and also about framing. And because you're reporting a lot about framing and how to deal with the language and the impact of language, Mrs. Banerjee, because earlier I wanted to ask you, because you interviewed Tinu Kropala, and maybe the audience is interested. I don't know, but I'm very curious about it, because how did you manage it to do this interview, actually? Because, I mean, that sounds weird now, right? I don't know. But, I mean, how can anti-democratic actors be reported on without trivializing and normalizing them, or giving them a platform, actually? And, I mean, as we know, they are talking a lot of populistic thing, and you have to be prepared very well.
I'm about to interview Alice Weile.
Yeah,
in 2
you told
weeks.
me. I forgot.
I'm not prepared to call them anti-democratic as persons themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fully aware of the program of the party, and I'm fully aware of all the problems that come with that. But when they come to our table and to our show, the first thing is that that's neutral ground. I know that this is a problem that we are exactly the problem that we discussed tonight, but. That's my primary rule. I have to deal with them I have to treat everyone equal in this format. that being said, it's indeed not easy to prepare for interviews like this, because you want to be able to debunk false information that might be there, or to debunk myths that are spread. And I think it's too much for one person to do that in a live interview. You can never be sure that there's nothing in an interview that you are not prepared for, which is true also for other interviews that I...
But you are doing a live interview, because you said, Mrs. Haynes,
it's live on tape.
A Trump interview in live is different.
It is a huge risk to do that. It is, but again, I do think that there's value to having the former president on the record. But I mean, you see, we've also got the first presidential debate in our country is happening this week. It's happening on Thursday. Mm-hmm. They had to change the rules of that just based on the dynamics of how those debates went 4 years ago. So there will not be a studio audience at that debate. There will be microphones muted when one of the candidates is speaking, so that the other candidate is not over-talking that candidate, because we saw a little bit of that happening, right, 4 years ago. And so trying to make it as level a playing field, I guess, as possible was the goal of CNN, which is putting on this debate. You know, you've got two moderators, so, you know, maybe between the two of them, you know, tag teaming this debate, they can, you know, actually ask questions that might get at some information around the issues that voters care about, instead of just, you know, witnessing a food fight for 90 minutes, which is what happened, you know, the last time around. I think 4 years ago, my takeaway from the first presidential debate was that there was no real talk of the issues, but only toxic masculinity was the main thing that was on the stage that night. And so trying to really avoid that to get to any kind of substance would be useful. But how much of the substance do you get to if you are doing an interview in real time, where again, you have to spend so much time if someone is saying things that are not true, or even misrepresenting facts like that. If that is going to be the whole, or what dominates most of the interview, is that really the thing that is most serving the audience that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, Mr. Rosen.
When we say things like, we must remain neutral, that idea of everyone being formally neutral, despite whatever beliefs they may have, depends on certain things also being true. For example, we're all talking about the same object, and we have different viewpoints on that object. We're all living the same history, and we have different evaluations of that history. But this is exactly what has happened in U.S. politics, is that Donald Trump has broken with those certainties. And if you go back to 2020 and the aftermath of the 2020 election, where the media and most people in the political system all said Biden won, and Trump refused to accept it, there was a shift in that critical period between Election Day and January 6th, where journalists did not take a neutral view on whether the 2020 election was properly conducted. They knew that the vote had shown Biden won. They knew that Trump lost. They believed their own polls. They saw the legal fight battle out, and they became kind of like agents for reality, insisting upon reality. And they didn't approach these claims among supporters of Trump that the election was stolen, and that they discarded those views as factually incorrect.
So were these mistakes? Like the mistakes?
Say,
as a reporter? what they did?
Well, I think this particular part of what they did, which I'm trying to describe, was not a mistake. It was extremely important for American journalists to not take seriously Trump's truth claim, because the way that that claim distorted American democracy was more important than that. And so there are some conditions where journalism can't actually exist until that condition is met. And approaching those kinds of problems is a lot different than just trying to remain neutral. Although I can totally understand why you would want to take that approach, especially to somebody who was testing the boundaries and becoming a little extreme on this and extreme on that. I understand why you would take a neutral approach, but we have to recognize that there are some facts that create democracy, and we can't remain neutral about them.
Yeah, I totally agree, and the neutral approach is just the starting point. Of course, you don't have to remain neutral while facing lies, for instance, or disinformation, and that's why it's all about substance. And the question is, how do you get to an interview where you can talk about substance and where you can make clear what your guest stands for and what their politics would really mean for the country. So what would happen if they were to be in the government, for instance?
Saruna Höker?
But this means that you need to have time for research. When you will do this interview, you need time to have the context, to be prepared. Maybe you're maybe it's not, and this was what many people criticize, is that interviews were done like by saying, how can we find the lie the person is doing? For me, it's like to go into an interview with this idea to get the lie out of him, to show the people this is a right-wing person and this happened a long time. So this changed now, but the question is about fact-checking, because we don't have good programs which do the fact-checking in the minute where it happens. We have for example, we have on the next day, we have it online, we have so I think we need to change also newsrooms, the kind of work, how we do it when we cover interviews like that. It must be in the minute, for example. Yeah, this is an opinion. I know it's a big debate in our structures, how to cover it. But for me, I heard that in the US, that anchors are saying something like Trump falsely claims. For me, this is also a brave thing to be an interviewer, which is this is a hard political interview, to point out what he's saying, because do you mean what you say? For example, we had the interview with with Höcke. Oh, Björn Höcke. So, yeah. And he was against inclusion. And the colleague was not going into this topic of a human right of inclusion, because this was missing. I don't want to blame this person, but this is what is our human rights about? What is the policy about? What we need to talk about? So what is the pluralistic discourse we are in? And what is the history? And this is, for me, this is all about context. And when we answer this question in a bigger term of what is responsibility, what is our audience, then we can do better interviews. And we need to fact check, and that's for me it's the main point, how to manage this. Because when it's not possible to do that, then the audience will not check it on the next day, and it will be on their side.
But wouldn't you say that this is actually a skill of the actual journalist? I mean, when you say fact-checking, and the one reporter said claim, I don't know, Trump is claiming whatever. So, yeah, I mean, this is actually a preparation skill, I would say, or that they know everything about this person and about the party and so on, which is actually a big thing. What I know in my bubble. I don't know if you have the same problem at ZDF and ARD, but that they say we don't talk to them, we don't interview them because we need huge preparation for them. That's why I was asking you. Yeah. So you're not afraid to interview the AfD. That's what I'm saying.
No. Yeah. No, and I'm trying to understand your argument. You think that there are people out there who say, I don't want to do an interview because I'm just afraid I won't be prepared enough?
There are people who say that.
Okay.
There are people, yes, there are colleagues who say that.
Or because you would be platforming misinformation or just flat out lies.
Yeah,
because you cannot fact checking it in live so fast.
I was. You saw me weighing my head when you said we have to have something like a live fact check. Of course, we have. That would be the best thing if you could immediately have a line saying no, this is false, and you can get more information on our website, for instance. But I think it doesn't stop there, because you can always see how. Anyone who wants to use populist arguments, and let's just acknowledge that it's not just AfD, but we have other parties too who work with these techniques. They will use certain parts of the interview, and they will just get their spin out as soon as they can during the interview. And so we cannot just stop at the live interview, but we also have to take care of what happens next and how is the information used that we helped to get out there.
So it's important because there are many people that are not watching in real time, right? That don't have an hour or 2 hours to watch an entire debate. I mean, I do it because I'm being paid to do it, right? But not everybody is being paid to do, to watch what is happening, even though it may be important to them. And so what are they doing? They're going to catch up the next day. They're going to catch up on social media. So they may just see a clip of that conversation. They may just see whatever, political parties or whatever accounts that they're following on social media are choosing to show them about what happened from that conversation. And so what is our responsibility as journalists to provide people who may have missed that conversation, they might have missed that interview or that debate, the context, the takeaways from that conversation that they may need to know that are factual and really truly representative of what happened.
But yeah,
just one thing about this point. I mean, this is only one point. Is the question about fact checking? I mean, it's much more. It's like Arne Semsrud, a political scientist, is talking about demanding journalism, which is a very important point because we also cover like quotes from politicians, and we don't have the context. Like, what is our responsibility? And I think to give more power to the democratic reporting. That's why we are here, and to this human right-based, what does it mean to do it on this ground? And I know that you need to invest money in the different programs to do that kind of work and to be prepared of what is coming. And I think this is now a time-changing moment because, and that is why I'm talking in this way. Yeah, and it will cost.
But you said we have to report them like in a democratic way. But Mr. Rosen, do we have tools, or do we? I mean, we can say we want to prevent or we want to protect the democracy in Germany or in the US. But how do we do it as a journalist?
Yeah. Well, our press corps has not asked themselves the question, are the tools we have up to the moment? Are they are they ready for what is happening and what is coming? And it's not that it's easy to be ready, but I think our press failed to actually sort of come together and say, either within the organizations and across organizations, this is a different kind of election. How are we going to cover it? That moment never really happened. But let me add to that by explaining how difficult parts of this are. In American journalism and German journalism, it's the same system. The act of verification is extremely central and basic to good journalism at every level. Verification meaning, is that really true? Did that really happen? How do we know this? What's the evidence for it? These are the kinds of things that you learn in journalism school, and they're very basic to the craft. But now, Trump has brought onto the stage a very strange deformation of that, where he came onto the scene in denial of a fact that was as confirmed as it could be, which was the information that Obama was an American citizen. Right? That fact, Obama was an American citizen, was as proven as you can get. There's a public document, you can go to it and see it, and you just simply can't go any further in verification than that. But an interesting thing happened with that claim. He started to deny the undeniable. And the act of doing that, of challenging a fact that is 100% proven, is that it releases energy, it releases controversy. People get angry, people get crazy. They start to repeat this ad, and it's the energy generated by this denial of fact that powers his political movement. And it was the denial of Obama's citizenship that brought Donald Trump onto the political stage. And we're still trying to live in the shock of that idea of there's verification, and it's the heart of journalism, and there's also verification undone. And we still don't know what's the right tool to combat that.
Well, so Jay is right. That was literally the original big lie.
Yeah.
That Donald Trump perpetrated, right? That put him into our politics. There was not enough of an examination of then, and what we continue to not examine deeply enough now is why was that something that was able to take root and take hold? Why was that something that was able to resonate with so much of a certain part of our population, right? It was racist for him to claim that Barack Obama was not an American citizen, or to try to other him in the ways that he tried to other him in the eyes of the American people. This is not somebody basically who is an American, literally, and for whatever that means to certain parts of the American electorate, right? And so if you have that and you see that that's resonating, you know that there's an opening for you. Fast forward to 2016 and it's time to make America great again. Well, what does that mean, right? We're not really asking real questions about that. It's just a catchy slogan that sounds good, and all of a sudden, wait, this person is president that we didn't expect to be elected president. Well, that comes with also understanding the American electorate, and honestly, that is the case for representation in our journalism that reflects the American electorate, the emerging small d democratic majority of our country. Journalism is still not living up to that. And U.S. political journalism is still much too white, much too male. That's, again, why we started the 19th, is because we were not accurately reflecting who lives in the country. And if we're not doing that, then how are we supposed to be covering our politics as honestly and accurately as possible?
But Mr. Rosen, you said that it's all about verification, and Trump is saying everything is fake news and so on. But I mean, the problem is also that, I mean, of course, we as a journalist, we studied, we worked, and some of them were in school, journalistic school, and worked all these, what you mentioned. But for the audience, it's much harder to get the truth, the real information, for example, and they don't know if it's truth or fake news or whatever, especially if it's from Trump or AfD or right-wing populists, whatever. So as we know now, I mean, 2016 was maybe a bit different, but now we are thinking or looking much more on TikTok, for example, where the AfD is very popular, very famous, and maybe that's why they also were so successful in the European election. So why I was asking about tools, also not for us journalists, but also for the audience, for example. What should they do to see?
That's a very difficult one. I don't know the answer to that. I think this whole area of what I've called verification in reverse, which is what it was, is difficult to even talk about, let alone how do you do journalism about it. Add to that the fact that we're in a kind of a golden age of propaganda now, where the Russian influence is strong. The fire hose of falsehood has been called by researchers, where you simply flood the public sphere with dubious information, lies, craziness and some truth, and you try to overwhelm people because there's too much said and you can't figure it out because it would take you too long and you don't have the context necessary for doing that. Steve Bannon, the advisor to Donald Trump, said it in a different way. It's the same idea. He said the Democrats are not the real opposition. The real opposition is the media, and the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit. Right? So this is a strategy, and the strategy is not just to lie your face off. It's to flood the zone, as he said, and make it impossible to fact check or to even care about political discourse, because the aim is not persuasion or to win the debate. The aim is to drive people from the public square by convincing them that it's impossible to be informed anyway, and so why even try?
And that none of it's
that, as a political method, which is what it is, requires some kind of new army, you know, some kind of new tool, but we don't know what that is now.
So how can we stop it, Mrs. Banerjee? Big question.
You're getting all the softballs today.
I tell you, and then
just in Germany.
No, I was just thinking we did not talk about trust yet, because there's a lot about trust when it comes to this. You described it very accurately what happened, and before that you said you talked about the necessity of verification, and we are so busy with verifying all this shit. So that we can't keep up with the real news or the real topics. So how to get out of it? You can't just ignore it. And what's happening is that people lose trust in our abilities. They lose trust in in what we report. Not just because it's too much, but because there's so much out there. And I was just thinking, it's really sad, this development, because it's not because people turn away from information or they are not interested enough, but because they are more interested than before. People are searching for information that is trustworthy, and they are just overwhelmed by what is out there, and in the end they don't trust anyone anymore.
That's why we were talking about bubbles and like groups, and because you were reporting a lot about marginalized groups, for example. I mean, when they think they're not reached or not presented in the media, so that's why
it's interesting. Our panel, we are not representing the German media. I mean, we three from this is not. The German media diversity is a fact, is a problem, because we have a lack of stories. Like after the elections, many journalists or marginalized journalists were saying, where are the stories about the marginalized groups after the elections? I mean, even the talk about who votes in the East and in the West, even that was problematic in some cases, because now we have the problem in the East. And what about the West? So I don't want to blame all this journalism thing, but in times of elections, to have multicultural perspectives on society is mostly important. And we have a problem in journalistic institutions which are not diverse. In that case, that the people don't need to be diverse. I mean, it would be nice if there would be more representation. But on the second hand, it needs to have an idea of what the problems are outside there. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't feel represented, and the image lack which we have, like trust, but also a struggle of image. This is not my media. So we are searching for different media. We have our media in social media. And then we have a big group of marginalized migrant people who vote for the AfD. How can that happen? I mean, there is analysis about that. So who has the easiest answer? So, and here we come back to our responsibility in democratic reporting is to be there for the audience and to see the topics which are on the street, and not only talk about right-winged extremists, because when we do that in Germany, we are always with the others, because no one in Germany is a right-winged extremist. And this in-between covering, this is our challenge.
So is this the problem, that they get more attention than actually the real people outside? Like because the AfD or Trump or populists get too much media attention?
To my mind, yes, because when we have, like what I was saying with Arne Semsrott, this demanding journalism, like we have a quote even from other parties, not only the AfD, and we have like a debate about migration, we have a debate about wokeness, gender, whatever, all these topics. How are these topics covered in a democratic way? Because when you don't get the link to human rights, and this is our responsibility, to make the link. What has a gender debate to do with human rights? For example, we need different stories to get this connection for people outside who don't understand anymore what's going on, because they will stay with this, I'm fed up with this woke thing, for example, and the AfD is fed up with this woke thing. But we had that before, we don't even know what the woke thing is, because it came from the US and it came with the elections after 2018 with Trump. It's not the woke thing in the US. So what I wanted to say is that we need to make this next step in covering stories. And this is also a good thing to prepare for interviews with people from the AfD. But also to cover, like when now people make their meetings, what we had, like this investigative groups, which are not only in the ARD and ZDF, which do the work like Correctiv and how they're all called, and they do the investigative work we need to do. We need to do more cooperative work to get the information in this political journalism space. This is what I'm thinking.
Okay. You also mentioned the election campaign. I mean, we talked before this discussion about it also, because there's also criticizing after the European election, actually here in Germany. I don't know if you also mentioned it or if you recognized it in the US too, but because there were critics after the European election that actually the TV shows, the TV election campaigns were actually more a statistic reading than a real showing, like as you said, like why the people voted for that or this and so on. And yeah, it's all the focus on East Germany and not like also West, you know, like this balanced manner. Which habits and patterns of election campaign reporting need to be examined, Mrs. Banerjee? Because you will go to Mainz now to your new position.
I'll be responsible for that part too.
That's why I'm asking you.
Yes. We always have to examine everything that we do constantly, and we always have to try to find new forms of looking at things. I was not. I did not really agree with that. I don't know if we're talking about the same article, because there are so many hopes that are lying on our work. On the one hand side, there was someone writing, it wasn't detailed enough when it came to the facts and to the statistics. Why don't we have something like the US, the US election night, where we look into each, is it precinct? How do you call it? Yeah, to each precinct and look what's happening there, what's going on there, what are the figures, and there could be much more action. And then there are the voices saying, what about the background? So I would love to have a bit of both. I would love to have a kind of reporting on election night that keeps people glued to the television, of course, because they want to see what's going on. But that's also giving more background on what will follow from what we see. That's incredibly difficult, because you need to do it live, you need to be prepared, and of course you can't look into the future, but we have to do it simultaneously.
Yeah. For the upcoming elections in both Germany and the US, we will looking forward, and probably we'll have more challenges for all of us. So let's get started to our Q&A to end this evening today. So I hope there will be some questions from the audience. Oh, where to start? I saw this man with the blonde hair first, sorry. Yeah, that's you? No, you? In the middle?
We have a micro, so if you feel comfortable using it, you can ask your question in German or in English. We can translate if you want to, if you want us to.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I really enjoyed it. Thilo Jung did an interview with Maximilian Krah for 6.5 hours. And I think maybe in this time where everything, like there's just too much information and there's so much going on, maybe just actually taking the time to really, really go in depth, and also talking, when you're talking to extremists, talk to them long enough and like ask again and again, like, what do you mean? Why? Like, why do you think like the birth certificate is forged or whatever? And like really let them make their point to the end of it. So, because often I feel like on TV, the debate cuts short where it's getting interesting. And yeah, so what do you think about a format like that, maybe?
For whom is the question for?
I don't know.
Mrs. Banerjee, you get
I will just say that I love the point that you're making, because I will say that that is a failure that I've noticed of live interviews a lot of times in American media, is that we do not ask enough follow-up questions of people. We let people just kind of say something that is either not true or not clear, and we do not ask them, what do you mean by that? Or actually, here is a fact that contradicts what you are saying. You know, can you square these two things? Make them right, instead of just kind of letting it sit out there and moving on to the next topic without acknowledging, that this answer was either not sufficient, not accurate, or not or that the viewer just deserves better from that person who has this platform and doesn't just get to say whatever they want without being held accountable.
You want to answer too? Yeah.
I think I have to. I personally do envy all those out there who have more time, like the podcast Alles Gesagt, for instance. It's a German podcast where the guest decides when the interview stops. It always has something like 4 hours, 6 hours.
The longest was 10 hours.
10 hours.
I remember.
I love it. I simply love it. But this is just not our media. This is not our platform. Until quite recently, we were not allowed to do everything we wanted online. It had to be something that was broadcasted in linear television, and then we could also publish it online. That's slowly changing, but also still within certain set of rules, and it's very difficult to change the program. But I think that's an interesting approach. You might have noticed that the interview. That Thilo Jung's interview had some critics. There were some critics saying it was an example of how not to do it. I didn't watch the full 6.5 hours yet. There were some really good parts and some that were not so brilliant, but that's just normal with an interview. And one thing I always notice is that people are so focused on one interview, hoping that this will be the moment where the mask comes off. And I'm not sure if that works that way. There are some lucky moments where you catch someone off guard, and of course, the longer you talk to someone, the higher the probability that might happen. But I don't know if time is the only factor that is important there.
Yeah. Maybe we want to have some more questions, maybe two. I don't know, the man on the left with the green shirt or yellow shirt?
I think I got the mic. Thank you very much.
Who? Oh, sorry.
Here, yeah, am I supposed, can everybody hear me at least? Okay. So I work in Italy, Poland, and France. I'm German, but I don't necessarily write in German. And I think I have maybe a slightly different perspective that if you bear with me, I took notes, as we were told. In the beginning, you said the political landscape in the US changed and reporting necessarily didn't follow, or didn't manage to follow in time. If you look at Italy with Berlusconi, if you look at Poland the past 8 years under the PiS party, that completely undermined public media. So your positions probably, you wouldn't be free in choosing what you want to report, or you would just be exchanged, which now even happened with the new government. France has been struggling with Marine Le Pen for years. Like, I remember in 2014, I was in a media discussion about how do we report on Marine Le Pen. And up until today, it's very hard. So I have to say, especially from having worked in Italy, journalism cannot be neutral the second it is attacked. So this freedom of being like, yeah, we have to report in a neutral way. The second someone cuts your funding, the second you are attacked with slaps, so by legal cases, it changes entirely how you have to write. Like, even my writing, when I started writing in Italy, I was told, this is not journalism, because I had this German understanding of it has to be equal, it has to be balanced, it's completely different. Even if you, like, now I think you referred to the golden age of propaganda. It was in the 1920s that Bernays published a book about propaganda that up until today is sort of important. If you think about 1935 and 37, there were gatherings of European journalists trying to understand what can we do. And I think my question, I mean, I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear your perspective, is why is it so hard to learn from each other? Because we're not learning from, like, we could learn from Poland now, we could learn from Italy. And I work on these sort of trying to build networks that do that, and I think the question probably would be time, but it's so hard to actually learn as journalists from our co-journalists who have maybe the same values or the same ideas. And also question to the foundation, how can we create spaces in which we can actually learn from each other?
Mr. Rosen, I guess you want to ask.
Very good question, thank you. I think it's hard for American journalists to learn from others because they just have no interest in it. And they don't see the rest of the world as possibly leading the conversation because they just don't think that that's really possible. And they also are unaware of differences in press systems that might depart from the way journalists in Washington and New York do it. Like, an example would be in Germany, you often have quotes approved by the journalist and the speaker. And in the United States, that's considered to be like a crime against journalism ethics. But most people who think of it that way don't know that there's a democracy, a thriving democracy in Germany, where approval of quotes is part of the process, right? It doesn't destroy journalism. And a lot of journalists are not aware of those kinds of things which differ across boundaries, but still allow for a democratic press. So that's the main reason, is that they don't have an interest. It would have been, and this gets to the heart of your question, it would have been very useful for American journalists the day after the 2016 election to start asking for advice from people who've been through one of these before, right? Who've been through the backsliding of a democracy, and what did they learn from it. That would have been something that would have allowed them to come up with tools that maybe they don't have yet. But that's not what happened, because American journalism is in some ways very satisfied with itself.
Would you answer?
I mean, I make a short answer. I mean, it's like, it's a good thing to have contacts to international journalists, because that widens your perspective. I would say, out of a German perspective, there is an interest, and there are multicultural journalists who have the contacts to other journalists. The question is, which stories can they cover? Which can they sell? And then there's one thing, and I think this is a big problem which we need to talk about, is to overcome the barrier of being an activist or not by covering human rights topics. and diversity and discrimination and racism and right-wing and all these topics. And we didn't have a decision now in journalism what it means to cover these topics as a science field, as not a feeling field and an emotional field, as a field which you have to have knowledge. And a lot of knowledge, and not only in one program, you need to have it like in the whole range of the institution with the leading people and this is our target, which we have now. And then a network would be good. Why? Because you can see that in other countries, they already started, or they have the same struggles. And it's not about being neutral in a way of being not clear with yourself. It's being neutral with the democracy. No, neutral, it's being like clear in a position with democracy.
Pro-democracy.
Yeah, pro-democracy, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe you have another question? Here, I saw you. Did you were?
Thank you so much for your valuable input. It was very, very thought-provoking, so thank you very much. My question circles back to the army you were mentioning and the tools that army need, because I wanted to know, in today's digital landscape where sensationalism often dominates and algorithms actually control visibility, how can journalists ensure that their news reaches the people effectively? And even like going even further, we were talking about information warfare. In an era marked by information warfare and non-state actors and state actors, you were mentioning Russia, but it's also even more. It's China, it's other states, and they are working together. It's non-state actors such as ISIS and Hamas that get their news out there. So my question is, in this very polluted information environment that we were discussing, first, how can journalists actually resist themselves to become a victim of those strategies, because they are employed by all sides? I was attending a security meeting beforehand, and they were talking about NATO strategies in information warfare. So I think that is also important to acknowledge, to not get caught on sides. So that would be my first question. And the most important question that keeps running through my head all the time is, what strategies, now it's like away, sorry, what strategies can the media adopt to contribute to social cohesion rather than polarization, what we are witnessing today?
Maybe they
Thank you.
Two long questions, but Mrs. Banerjee?
Our house, our broadcaster, we as a broadcaster, we are working on something which I think is very interesting. It's not me myself. I'm not working on this. It's other people, but they are working on a new platform, and it's a collaboration with other public broadcasters from around the world. One is from Denmark, one is from Canada, and there are others involved. I don't know all the countries. They are trying to offer some kind of, let's say, new social media, some kind of discussion platform that is working more towards integrative discussion and more exchange, and more than just thumbs up or thumbs down. And I know that most of the social media started out with this idea of saying we want to bring people together and to create a vital exchange, and then all of a sudden there's this hatred all over the place. And let's hope this one will work out better, and it will be with real names, I think. But I'm not so sure about the details, but I think it's an interesting thought, because what we need to do is to reach out and to enable our audience to take part in the public discussion in a more active way, to get easy access to all the information that we are working out. I would love to have much more resources. I know within the German debate that sounds strange, and I'm not just talking about money, but in the German debate there's the perception that we have tons of resources and too much resources, but I think in that field we need even more resources. And If we can reach out to our audience and establish a new kind of relationship and discussion, that might help. It's not the answer to everything, but I think it's a very good approach.
Thank you.
I'm not able to answer your question because I'm still trying to figure out how to describe the problem. And one way of doing that is to understand that the most important and excellent newsrooms in the American press, the New York Times, Washington Post, right now, as we're sitting here, 95% of the regular audience are people who intend to vote for Biden. It's not that they're leftist operatives, or it's just that they're on that side of this election. And what it also means is that the right has been successful at not only creating its own media system, which they have been, but they have gone a step beyond that in that they are, and this is a terrible phrase to use, but what else can we do but use the words we have? They have their own reality, right? Their own reality. Now that makes almost no sense, but yet it's something we try to capture by using these absurd terms. And so that has led to observers, including journalists, say, well, now they have their own reality and other people have a different reality, and that's just the way it is. And when they are led to say something like that, they've given up. In a way, they've said, this is too much for me, I can't handle this anymore. So I don't know what to do about it. I'm still at the stage of, if we could just describe it, people would see how different this election is from every other one that they've participated in. Because it used to be that if you said, as a president of the United States, something that could be disproved, if you made a factual error and you were president of the United States, that was a big deal. And the next day, all of his staff would say, we have to correct this. And it would be a story for a week if he didn't correct it. One fact incorrect, right? When Trump ended his presidency, he had over 30,000 lies and mischaracterizations. So Bannon won. The flood is here. And no, I don't know how to deal with that. I'm still trying to figure out how to describe it.
Maybe we have one more question, as we have to, sadly, maybe on this side. Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't have.
Thank you for the fruitful conversation and the valuable input. My question leads to false equivalency that is also listed as a core value on the 19th. When we have discussions that are often limited by time or by word count, how do we contextualize without becoming partial in the process, so that we can juxtapose different perspectives but also arguments without becoming PR agencies? So in a way, showing without telling, but also making sure that people understand where an argument is coming from. How was it constructed? So the logical approach behind it, and also in order to discover like false information, fake news, like information published in a manipulative way. And I would like to ask this question to the whole panel, but also first get the opinion of you, Madam Haynes.
Well, thank you for that question. And yeah, at the 19th, we do not, the false equivalency, the both sidesing of things like people's basic dignity and humanity is not up for discussion. The idea that voting rights is something that we need to kind of examine both sides of is not something that we're interested in doing, because it's again, those types of things go against the tenets of what we believe contribute to a healthy democracy in which everybody is able to feel empowered and everybody is able to participate. So, for us, it really required a completely different approach to political journalism that really focuses much more on the people on the receiving end of the policies and the politics that are happening in our country. Yes, we love elections. We love to cover candidates. Like that, it's not that we don't cover those people, but we also cover the issues that the American people care about and the issues that are affecting the American people. And so I guess our counterweight to a lot of the misinformation and disinformation is accurate information, is to actually reflect what is happening on the ground in communities across the country and not just what people are saying in Washington or New York or, you know, you know, for example, the attack on the queer community in America, specifically on, you know, transgender people in America, that is a real thing that is happening. We are not going to say, oh, well, you know, maybe that's not happening, or maybe this is why this is maybe okay. It's like, no, this is not okay. And here's what is actually happening to the people that are, you know, being affected by these policies. Or, for example, in 2022, after, you know, the Dobbs decision came down from the Supreme Court and abortion was no longer federally protected in America, you know, reporting on the ground in places where people's access to abortion care was limited, what that looked like for them and why that mattered for them and how that might impact how they would vote politically. Like, because we were doing that reporting while a lot of the rest of political journalism was saying, oh, people aren't going to care about this issue by the time we get to the election. Like, they're not going to vote based on that. It's like, no, we actually know that women are very angry about this and that they are ready to absolutely cast a ballot that shows how angry they are about this happening, right? And so that was how we were able to be accurate, but also not kind of contribute to the collective mindset in a lot of political journalism that, like, oh, well, this is the story, this is the narrative, that people aren't going to care about this, that women aren't actually that upset about it, or they'll forget about it in 6 months or whatever. So for us, focusing on voters is very, very important. And trying to show a range of perspectives, whether that is racial diversity or age diversity or diversity in terms of what part of the country somebody lives in, like trying to reflect as much of that as possible so that, I mean, you can never actually predict what's going to happen in an election, no matter how many, you know, polls you do. The poll that counts as election day, right? But at the same time, I don't want to be caught completely by surprise the day after the election and saying, what happened? How did we get here? I had no idea these people felt this way. Like, that is, if that is where we are on the other side of an election, we did something wrong.
Yeah, we will see then in the autumn. Marcel, thank you, and thank you for your questions and that you came here today, and also in the live stream. Sadly, we have to close this round today. I guess there are much more questions, and also we could discuss about this topic like days. So thanks for coming, and I wish you a good evening. And I mean, I don't know if you're still here. Thank you. And I don't know if you're still here, so if you have further questions, of course, you can just ask them if it's okay for you. So thanks a lot and good evening.